I call Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, there's been a lot said in this debate about John Key's legacy and what it will be. And I think that in itself, Mr Speaker, is quite telling, that people have to discuss and debate and decide what John Key's legacy as Prime Minister of this country for 8 years will be. And it is strange because there is nothing that stands out over those 8 years that will be a legacy for John Key as Prime Minister. Great Prime Ministers are remembered in history, Mr Speaker. John Key will not be remembered in history. He does not have a legacy. He does not have any great thing that he has done, and I challenge any member on that side of the House, or this, come to that, to name 2 great things that John Key has done in his 8 years as Prime Minister that will go down in history, that will leave him as a household name, the likes of Savage, the likes of Holyoake. He is not a man of that ilk, Mr Speaker. We have been criticised in this corner of the House for being perhaps less gracious than some other speakers in noting the departure of a man who has spent 8 years in the top job. Mr Speaker, I think the response has been appropriate. In 2008, when John Key came into power, I voted for him. I was not a member of New Zealand First in those days. I had sat through the Helen Clark years and been so tragically disappointed that, having grown up as a social predator, I changed my allegiance to National because I felt they offered hope. And I listened to John Key on the hustings, and I listened to what National was saying, and I thought they offered a great change and a great hope for New Zealand, for the future, for me, for my kids. And I was so sorely disappointed, Mr Speaker, with what was delivered, that I joined New Zealand First, and here I am. Because there is a party in this House that says the things that the National Party of old used to say, and it's New Zealand First. And there is a great leader in this House who will be remembered through history, and that's Winston Peters.
That's right. You are laughing now.
And you may laugh now, but change is sweeping the world. We have seen great upsets. In Canada, the Liberal Party went from being the third party to being a majority government. In the UK, Brexit triumphed. In the United States, Trump has triumphed. And at every turn, they have confounded the pundits and they have confounded the pollsters, and it has been the real people who have spoken up and spoken out. And in the election coming next year, that is what will happen in New Zealand. And John Key knows it. He has seen the writing on the wall. He has seen the juggernaut approaching. He has seen the size of the dead rat that he's going to have to swallow, and he can't stand that size, and he's not going to do it. And he's a trader, first and foremost. The man is a trader. He knows when to buy, he knows when to sell. He knows that for him, this is the time to sell, this is the time to get out. He's cutting and running while it's a good time for him. And you can say anything you like, Mr Speaker. The other side can say anything they like about it being a strategic decision. They can say that he's leaving a party in good shape. At the end of the day, he's leaving the party. And he's leaving them 2 weeks out from the Christmas break. And he's leaving them effectively 6 months of campaigning with a new leader coming into an election when their popularity has peaked, when they're on the slide, and when the chickens are going to come home to roost. And we know this, Mr Speaker, in New Zealand First, because we talk to the people. The Right Honourable Winston Peters fills halls up and down this country. 220 in Tauhei last night. We had 300 in Rangiora, 350 in Levin, 220 in Gore. You never hear about that in the media, Mr Speaker, in the mainstream media, but you know when you're there, and you hear about it from people who were there, and you read about it on social media. And that is what people are saying around the country right now, Mr Speaker. That is the undercurrent that is flowing through. It is what happened in the UK, it's what happened in the US, it's what happened in Canada, it's what happened with the election in Australia, and it is going to happen here. And John Key, credit where it's due, is no fool. He can see what is going to happen, and he's getting out while the getting's good. Every political career comes to an end, Mr Speaker, one way or another. Most of them end in ignominy. So to be able to choose the time that you go is perhaps a credit to the man. But it cannot be said that he is leaving his party in the best of states. He should have announced a year ago that he was not going to complete a 4th term. He could have led his party into an election and told the people and told his party that he was going to pull out a year or a year and a half or 2 years into another term if he'd won. That would have been a more honest thing to do. But no, instead, after 8 years of lots of horse trading and very little else and lots of noise and nothing to show in the way of a tangible achievement, he's decided this is the time to cut and run, this is the time to hit the silk, and he's bailing. And he's getting out, and he'll go off to Hawaii and play golf with Obama, and they can talk about the old days when they used to be in power. And I suppose in a year or so's time he'll pick up a knighthood, and that will be the end of it. But I'll say this again, Mr. Speaker. Great Prime Ministers are recorded in the annals of history. Their names will be known for a long time. Love her or hate her, in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, people will still be talking about Helen Clark. In 50 years' time, they will still be talking about Rob Muldoon. 100 years from now, people studying history will learn about the Right Honourable Winston Peters. But 5 years from now, people will be saying, John who? Because he's a grey man, because he's a lightweight, because he's had a nice long hold of the tiller while the sea's been calm, and don't quote the GFC, it didn't affect New Zealand or Australia, our banks weren't exposed to that. He's had no real challenges, and he's achieved nothing. His legacy will be that he will be forgotten. He doesn't even have the flag changed because nobody wanted that, and he couldn't see through that campaign at the beginning to see that that was going to be the result. The clever thing for a good operator, for a good political operator with a good brain, a good political sense of nous to have done would have been to recognise that that campaign was doomed to failure early on in the piece and pulled the pin. That would have shown some grace. That would have shown the people that he was listening. But no, he pushed on with it regardless of the fact that it was never going to succeed, spent $26 million of taxpayers' money that could have been much better spent on hip operations or fixing the roads or schools or any one of a number of other things. But $26 million to a multi-millionaire share trader, money trader, is just chicken feed, particularly when it's somebody else's. And when you have a vanity project that you want for your legacy. Well, that will be his legacy, Mr. Speaker. The fact that nothing happened and nothing changed. Well, Mr. Speaker, next year things are going to change because the tide of change that is sweeping the world will sweep through New Zealand. And they can scoff on that side of the House. They can scoff, and they do scoff, because they're not in touch with the real people. They're not in touch with Heartland New Zealand. We are. New Zealand First is. And we will be the alternative. And we will go into the 217 campaign, New Zealand First, part of a three-way race, standing on our own, behind the Right Honourable Winston Peters. And I think a lot of people all around, the pundits, the pollsters, people on that side of the House, and even people around us, are in for a great surprise, Mr. Speaker. They could take the message now. They could heed the warning. But the indication is that they're not going to. The indication is that things are going to unfold here exactly the same as they unfolded around the rest of the world, because the people who are currently in charge are every bit as much out of touch here as they were over there. And we will see change come. And I'm afraid to say that John Key's legacy will be that he is forgotten as a man who, as Prime Minister for 8 years, achieved nothing, changed nothing, and will not be remembered for anything. Thank you.
David Seymour.
Well, Mr. Speaker,